Chapter 11 of Bethink Yourselves by Leo Tolstoy, translated by V. Chertkov. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. I had finished this writing when news came of the destruction of 600 innocent lives opposite Port Arthur. It would seem that the useless suffering and death of these unfortunate deluded men who have needlessly and so dreadfully perished ought to disabuse those who were the cause of this destruction. I am not alluding to Makarov and other officers. All these men knew what they were doing, and wherefore, and they voluntarily, for personal advantage, for ambition, did as they did, disguising themselves in pretended patriotism, a pretence not condemned merely because it is universal. I allude rather to those unfortunate men drawn from all parts of Russia, who by the help of religious fraud and under fear of punishment have been torn from an honest, reasonable, useful, laborious family life, driven to the other end of the world, placed on a cruel, senseless machine for slaughter, and torn to bits, drowned along with this stupid machine in a distant sea, without any need or any possibility of advantage from all their privations, efforts, and sufferings, or from the death which overtook them. In 1830, during the Polish War, the adjutant Vilijinsky sent to St. Petersburg by Klopitsky, in a conversation held in French with Dibich, an answer to the latter's demand that the Russian troops should enter Poland, and said to him, "Monsieur le Maréchal, I think that in that case it will be quite impossible for the Polish nation to accept this manifesto. Believe me, the Emperor will make no further concessions. Then I foresee that, unhappily, there will be war, that much blood will be shed, there will be many unfortunate victims. Do not think so. At most there will be 10,000 who will perish on both sides, and that is all," said Dibich in his German accent, quite confident that he, together with another man as cruel and foreign to Russia and Polish life as he was himself, Nicholas I, had the right to condemn or not to condemn to death 10 or 100,000 Russians and Poles. One hardly believes that this could have been, so senseless and dreadful is it, and yet it was. 60,000 maintainers of their families lost their lives owing to the will of those men, and now the same thing is taking place. In order not to let the Japanese into Manchuria and to expel them from Korea, not 10,000 but 50 and more thousand will, according to all probability, be necessary. I do not know whether Nicholas II and Kuropatkin say like Dibich in so many words that not more than 50,000 lives will be necessary for this on the Russian side alone, only and only that. But they think it. They cannot but think it, because the work they are doing speaks for itself. That ceaseless stream of unfortunate, deluded Russian peasants, now being transported by thousands to the Far East, these are those same not more than 50,000 live Russian men whom Nicholas Romanov and Alexis Kuropatkin have decided they may get killed, and who will be killed, in support of those stupidities, robberies, and every kind of abomination which were accomplished in China and Korea by immoral, ambitious men now sitting peacefully in their palaces and expecting new glory and new advantage and profit from the slaughter of these 50,000 unfortunate, defrauded Russian working men, guilty of nothing and gaining nothing by their sufferings and death. For other people's land, to which the Russians have no right, which has been criminally seized from its legitimate owners, and which in reality is not even necessary to the Russians, and also for certain dark dealings by speculators, who in Korea wish to gain money out of other people's forests, many millions of money are spent, that is, a great part of the labour of the whole of the Russian people, while the future generations of this people are bound by debts, its best workmen are withdrawn from labour, and scores of thousands of its sons are mercilessly doomed to death. And the destruction of these unfortunate men is already begun. More than this, the war is being managed by those who have hatched it so badly, so negligently. All is so unexpected, so unprepared, that, as one paper admits, Russia's chief chance of success lies in the fact that it possesses inexhaustible human material. It is upon this that those rely who send to death scores of thousands of Russian men. It is frankly said that the regrettable reverses of our fleet must be compensated on the land. In plain language this means that if the authorities have badly directed things on sea, and by their negligence have destroyed not only the nation's millions, but thousands of lives, we can make it up by condemning to death on land several more scores of thousands. When crawling locusts cross rivers, it happens that the lower layers are drowned until from the bodies of the drowned is formed a bridge over which the upper ranks can pass. In the same way are the Russian people being disposed of. Thus the first lower layer is already beginning to drown, indicating the way to other thousands who will all likewise perish. And are the originators, directors, and supporters of this dreadful work beginning to understand their sin, their crime? Not in the least. They are persuaded that they have fulfilled and are fulfilling their duty, and they are proud of their activity. People speak of the loss of the brave Makarov, who, as all agree, was able to kill men very cleverly. They deplore the loss of a drowned excellent machine of slaughter, which had cost so many millions of rubles. They discuss the question of how to find another murderer as capable as the poor benighted Makarov. They invent new, still more efficacious tools of slaughter. And all the guilty men engaged in this dreadful work, from the Tsar to the humblest journalist, all with one voice call for new insanities, new cruelties, for the increase of brutality and hatred of one's fellow men. Quote, Makarov is not the only man in Russia, and every admiral placed in his position will follow in his steps and will continue the plan and the idea of Makarov, who has nobly perished in the strife, unquote, writes the Novo Vremya. Quote, let us earnestly pray God for those who have laid down their lives for the sacred fatherland, without doubting for one moment that the fatherland will give us new sons equally virtuous for the further struggle, and will find in them an inexhaustible store of strength for a worthy completion of the work, unquote, writes the St. Petersburg Viedomosti. Quote, a ripe nation will draw no other conclusion from the defeat, however unprecedented, than that we should continue, develop, and conclude the strife. Therefore let us find in ourselves new strength. New heroes of the spirit will arise, unquote, writes the Russ, and so forth. So murder and every kind of crime go on with greater fury. People enthusiastically admire the martial spirit of the volunteers who, having come unexpectedly upon 50 of their fellow men, slay all of them, or take possession of a village and slaughter all its population, or hang or shoot those accused of being spies, that is, of doing the very same thing which is regarded as indispensable and is constantly done on our side. News about these crimes is reported in pompous telegrams to their chief director, the Tsar, who, in return, sends to his virtuous troops his blessing on the continuation of such deeds. Is it not evident that, if there be a salvation from this position, it is only one, that one which Jesus teaches? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, that which is within you, and all the rest, that is, all that practical welfare toward which man is striving, will of itself be realized. Such is the law of life. Practical welfare is attained not when man strives toward this practical welfare. Such striving, on the contrary, for the most part removes man from the attainment of what he seeks, but only when man, not thinking of the attainment of practical welfare, strives toward the most perfect fulfillment of that which before God, before the source and law of his life, he regards as right. Then only, incidentally, is practical welfare also attained. So that the true salvation of men is only one thing, the fulfillment of the will of God by each individual man within himself, that is, in that portion of the universe which alone is subject to his power. In this is the chief, the only, destiny and duty of every individual man, and at the same time this is the only means by which every individual man can influence others, and therefore to this and to this only should all the efforts of every man be directed. May 2nd, 1904. End of chapter 11. With despair in their hearts, leaving behind a good rational life, leaving their wives and their children, they go. Yesterday I met a reservist soldier, accompanied by his mother and wife. All three were riding in a cart. He had had a drop too much. His wife's face was swollen with tears. He turned to me. "Good-bye to thee, Lev Nikolaevich. Off to the Far East." "Well, art thou going to fight?" "Well, some one has to fight." "No one need fight." He reflected for a moment. "But what is one to do? Where can one escape?" I saw that he had understood me, had understood that the work to which he was being sent was an evil work. Where can one escape? That is the precise expression of that mental condition which in the official and journalistic world is translated into the words, "for the faith, the Tsar, and the fatherland." Those who, abandoning their hungry families, go to suffering, to death, say as they feel, "Where can one escape?" Whereas those who sit in safety, in their luxurious palaces, say that all Russian men are ready to sacrifice their lives for their adored monarch, and for the glory and greatness of Russia. Yesterday, from a peasant I know, I received 2 letters, one after the other. This is the first. "Dear Lev Nikolaevich, well, today I have received the official announcement of my call to the service. Tomorrow I must present myself at the headquarters. That is all. And after that, to the Far East to meet the Japanese bullets. About my own and my household's grief I will not tell you. It is not you who will fail to understand all the horror of my position and the horrors of war. All this you have long ago painfully realized, and you understand it all. How I have longed to visit you, to have a talk with you. I had written to you a long letter in which I described the torments of my soul, but I had not had time to copy it when I received my summons. What is my wife to do now with her 4 children? As an old man, of course, you cannot do anything yourself for my folks, but you might ask some of your friends in their leisure to visit my orphaned family. I beg you earnestly that if my wife proves unable to bear the agony of her helplessness with her burden of children, and makes up her mind to go to you for help and counsel, you will receive and console her. Although she does not know you personally, she believes in your word, and that means much. I was not able to resist the summons, but I say beforehand that through me not one Japanese family shall be orphaned. My God, how dreadful is all this, how distressing and painful to abandon all by which one lives and in which one is concerned. The second letter is as follows. Kindest Lev Nikolaevich, only 1 day of actual service has passed, and I have already lived through an eternity of most desperate torments. From 8 o'clock in the morning till 9 in the evening we have been crowded and knocked about to and fro in the barrack yard like a herd of cattle. The comedy of medical examination was 3 times repeated, and those who had reported themselves ill did not receive even 10 minutes' attention before they were marked satisfactory. When we, those 2,000 satisfactory individuals, were driven from the military commander to the barracks, along the road, spread out for almost a verst, stood a crowd of relatives, mothers and wives with infants in arms. And if you had only heard and seen how they clasped their fathers, husbands, sons, and hanging around their necks wailed hopelessly. Generally I behave in a reserved way and can restrain my feelings, but I could not hold out, and I also wept. In journalistic language the same is expressed thus: the upheaval of patriotic feeling is immense. Where is the standard that can measure all this immensity of woe now spreading itself over almost 1/3 of the world? And we are now that food for cannon which in the near future will be offered as sacrifice to the God of vengeance and horror. I cannot manage to establish my inner balance. Oh, how I execrate myself for this double-mindedness, which prevents my serving one Master and God. This man does not yet sufficiently believe that what destroys the body is not dreadful, but that which destroys both the body and the soul. Therefore he cannot refuse to go. Yet while leaving his own family he promises beforehand that through him not one Japanese family shall be orphaned. He believes in the chief law of God, the law of all religions, to act toward others as one wishes others to act toward oneself. Of such men, more or less consciously recognizing this law, there are in our time, not in the Christian world alone, but in the Buddhistic, Mohammedan, Confucian and Brahminic world, not only thousands, but millions. There exist true heroes, not those who are now being feted because, having wished to kill others, they were not killed themselves, but true heroes who are now confined in prisons and in the province of Yakutsk for having categorically refused to enter the ranks of murderers, and who have preferred martyrdom to this departure from the law of Jesus. There are also such as he who writes to me, who go but who will not kill. But also that majority which goes without thinking, and endeavours not to think of what it is doing, still in the depth of its soul does now already feel that it is doing an evil deed by obeying authorities who tear men from labour and from their families, and send them to needless slaughter of men, repugnant to their soul and their faith. And they go only because they are so entangled on all sides. Where can one escape? Meanwhile, those who remain at home not only feel this, but know and express it. Yesterday, in the high road, I met some peasants returning from Tula. One of them was reading a leaflet as he walked by the side of his cart. I asked, "What is that? A telegram?" "This is yesterday's. But here is one of today." He took another out of his pocket. We stopped. I read it. "You should have seen what took place yesterday at the station," he said. "It was dreadful. Wives, children, more than 1,000 of them weeping. They surrounded the train, but were allowed no further. Strangers wept, looking on. One woman from Tula gasped and fell down dead. 5 children. They have since been placed in various institutions, but the father was driven away all the same. What do we want with this Manchuria, or whatever it is called? There is sufficient land here. And what a lot of people and of property has been destroyed." Yes, the relation of men to war is now quite different from that which formerly existed, even so lately as the year 77. That which is now taking place never took place before. The papers set forth that, during the receptions of the Tsar, who is travelling about Russia for the purpose of hypnotizing the men who are being sent to murder, indescribable enthusiasm is manifested amongst the people. As a matter of fact, something quite different is being manifested. From all sides one hears reports that in one place 3 reservists have hanged themselves, in another spot 2 more, in yet another about a woman whose husband had been taken away, bringing her children to the conscription committee room and leaving them there, while another hanged herself in the yard of the military commander. All are dissatisfied, gloomy, exasperated. The words "For the faith, the King and the Fatherland," the national anthem, and shouts of hurrah no longer act upon people as they once did. Another warfare of a different kind, the struggling consciousness of the deceit and sinfulness of the work to which people are being called, is more and more taking possession of the people. Yes, the great strife of our time is not that now taking place between the Japanese and the Russians, nor that which may blaze up between the white and yellow races, not that strife which is carried on by mines, bombs, bullets, but that spiritual strife which without ceasing has gone on and is now going on between the enlightened consciousness of mankind, now waiting for manifestation, and that darkness and that burden which surrounds and oppresses mankind. In His own time Jesus yearned in expectation, and said, "I came to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish that it were already kindled." Luke chapter 12, verse 49. That which Jesus longed for is being accomplished. The fire is being kindled. Then do not let us check it, but let us spread and serve it. 13th of May, 1904. I should never finish this paper if I were to continue to add to it all that corroborates its essential idea. Yesterday the news came in of the sinking of the Japanese ironclads, and in the so-called higher circles of Russian fashionable, rich, intellectual society they are, without the slightest conscientious scruples, rejoicing at the destruction of 1,000 human lives. Yet today I have received from a simple seaman, a man standing on the lowest plane of society, the following letter: Much respected Lev Nikolaevich, I greet you with a low bow, with love, much respected Lev Nikolaevich. I have read your book. It was very pleasant reading for me. I have been a great lover of reading your works. Well, Lev Nikolaevich, we are now in a state of war. Please write to me, whether it is agreeable to God or not that our commanders compel us to kill. I beg you, Lev Nikolaevich, write to me please whether or not the truth now exists on earth. Tell me, Lev Nikolaevich. In church here a prayer is being read. The priest mentions the Christ-loving army. Is it true or not that God loves war? I pray you, Lev Nikolaevich, have you got any books from which I could see whether truth exists on earth or not? Send me such books. What they cost I will pay. I beg you, Lev Nikolaevich, do not neglect my request. If there are no books, then send me a letter. I will be very glad when I receive a letter from you. I will await your letter with impatience. Goodbye for the present. I remain alive and well, and wish the same to you from the Lord God. Good health and good success in your work. End of chapter 12, and end of Bethink Yourselves by Leo Tolstoy, translated by V. Chertkov, read for LibriVox.org by David Barnes.